everyone. Hello. I'm back to read chapter 24 and 25. I just finished reading 22 and 23. Almost halfway. Chapter 24. The Bandalore. Daisy was about to turn 8 years old, so she decided to invite Bird Beamish to tea. A thick wall of ice seemed to have grown up between Daisy and Bert since his father had died. He was also with Roderick Roach, who was very proud to have a son of an Ickabog victim as a friend. But Daisy's coming birthday, which was 3 days before Bert's, would be a chance to find out whether they could repair their friendship. So she asked her father to write a note to Mrs. Beamish inviting her and her son to tea. To Daisy's delight, a note came back accepting the invitation, and even though Bert still didn't talk to her at school, she held out hope that everything would be made right on her birthday. Although he was well paid as a carpenter to the king, even Mr. Dovetail had felt the pinch of paying the Ickabog tax, so he and Daisy had bought fewer pastries than usual, and Mr. Dovetail stopped buying wine. However, in honor of Daisy's birthday, Mr. Dovetail bought out his last bottle of Giroux wine, and Daisy collected all her savings and bought 2 expensive Hopes of Heaven for herself and Bert, because she knew they were his favorite. The birthday tea didn't start well. Firstly, Mr. Dovetail proposed a toast to Mr. Major Beamish, which made Mrs. Beamish cry. Then the four of them sat down to eat, but nobody seemed to be able to think of anything to say until Bert remembered that he'd bought Daisy a present. Bert had seen a bandalore, which is what people called yo-yos at that time, in the toy shop window, and bought it with all his saved pocket money. Daisy had never seen one before, and what with Bert teaching her to use it, and Daisy swiftly becoming better at it than Bert was, and Mrs. Beamish and Mr. Dovetail drinking Giroux sparkling wine, conversation began to flow much more easily. The truth was that Bert had missed Daisy very much, but hadn't known how to make up with her, with Roderick Roach always watching. Soon, though, it felt as though the fight in the courtyard had never happened, and Daisy and Bert were snorting with laughter about their teacher's habit of taking 4 boogies in his nose when he thought none of the children were looking. The painful subject of dead parents or fights that got out of hand, or King Fred the Fearless, were all forgotten. The children were wiser than the adults. Mr. Dovetail hadn't tasted wine in a long time, and unlike his daughter, he didn't stop to consider that discussing the monster that was supposed to have killed Miniature Beamish might be a bad idea. Daisy only realized what her father was doing when he raised his voice over the children's laughter. All I'm saying, Bertha, Mr. Dovetail was almost shouting, is where's the proof? I like to see proof, that's all. You don't consider it proof, then, that my husband was killed, said Mrs. Beamish, whose kindly face suddenly looked dangerous. Or poor little Noby Buttons. Little Noby Buttons, repeated Mr. Dovetail. Little Noby Buttons. Now you come to mention it. I'd like proof of little Noby Buttons. Who was he? Where did he live? Where's that old widowed mother gone who wore that ginger wig? Have you ever met Buttons family in the city, within the city? And if you press me, said Mr. Dovetail, brandishing his wine glass, if you press me, Bertha, I'll ask you this. Why was Noby Button's coffin so heavy when all that was left of him were his shoes and a shin bone? Daisy made a furious face to try to shut her father up, but he didn't notice. Taking another large gulp of wine, he said, "It doesn't add up, Bertha. Doesn't add up. Who's to say, and this is just an idea, mind you, but who's to say poor Beamish didn't fall off his horse and break his neck, and Lord Spittleworth saw an opportunity to pretend the Ickabog killed him and charge us all a lot of gold." Mrs. Beamish rose slowly to her feet. She wasn't a tall woman, but in her anger she seemed to tower awfully over Mr. Dovetail. "My husband," she whispered in a voice so cold that Daisy felt goosebumps, "was the best horseman of all Cornucopia. My husband would no sooner have fallen off his horse than you'd chop off your leg with your axe. Dan Dovetail, nothing short of a terrible monster could have killed my husband, and you ought to watch your tongue, because saying the Ickabog isn't real happens to be treason." "Treason," jeered Mr. Dovetail. "Come off it, Bertha. You're not going to stand there and tell me you believe in this treason nonsense. Why, a few months ago, not believing in the Ickabog made you a sane man, not a traitor." "That was before we knew the Ickabog was real," screeched Mrs. Beamish. "Bert, we're going home." No, please don't go," Daisy cried. She picked up a little box she stowed under her chair and ran out into the garden after the Beamish. "Bert, please look. I got us hopes of heaven. I spent all my pocket money on them." Daisy wasn't to know that when he saw hopes of heaven now. Bert was instantly reminded of the day he'd found out his father was dead. The very last hopes of heaven he'd ever eaten had been in the king's kitchen, when his mother was promising him they have heard if anything had happened to Major Beamish. All the same, Bert didn't mean to dash Daisy to the ground. He meant only to push it away. Unluckily, Daisy lost her grip on the box, and the costly pastries fell into the flower bed and were covered in earth. Daisy burst into tears. "Well, if all you care about is pastries," shouted Bert, and he opened the garden gate and led his mother away. Chapter 25. Lord Spittleworth's Problem. Unfortunately for Lord Spittleworth, Mr. Dovetail wasn't the only person who started voicing doubts about the Ickabog. Cornucopia was growing slowly poorer. The rich merchants had no problems paying their Ickabog taxes. They gave the collectors 2 ducats a month, then increased the prices of their pastries, cheeses, hams, and wines to pay themselves back. However, 2 gold ducats a month was increasingly hard to find for the poorer folk, especially with food at the market. gets more expensive. Meanwhile, up in the marshlands, children began to grow hollow-cheeked. Spittleworth, who had spies in every city and village, began hearing word that people wanted to know what their gold was being spent on, and even to demand proof that the monster was still a danger. Now, people said of the cities of the cornucopia that their inhabitants had different natures. Jerome were supposed to be brawlers and dreamers, the Kurtzbergers peaceful and courteous, while the citizens of Choseville were often said to be proud, even snooty. But the people of Baronstown were said to be plain speakers and honest dealers, and it was here that the first serious outbreak of disbelief in the king and the Ickabog happened. A butcher called Tubby Tenderloin called a meeting in the town. Oh, Tubby was careful not to say he didn't believe in the Ickabog, but he invited everyone at the meeting to sign a petition to the king asking for evidence that the Ickabog tax was still necessary. As soon as the meeting was over, Spittleworth's spy, who had a course attended the meeting, jumped on his horse and rode south, arriving at the palace at midnight. Woken by a footman, Spittleworth hurriedly summoned Lords Flapoon and Major Roach from their beds, and the two men joined Spittleworth in his bedroom to hear what the spy had to say. The spy told the story of the treasonous meeting, then unfurled a map on which he helpfully circled the house of the ringleaders, including that of Toby Tenderloin. Excellent work, growled Roach. We'll have all of them arrested for treason and slung in jail. Simple. It isn't simple at all, said Spittleworth impatiently. There were 200 people at this meeting, and we can't lock up 200 people. We haven't got room. For one thing, and for another, everyone will just say it proves we can't show the Ickabog's real. Then we'll shoot 'em all. We'll shoot 'em, said Flapoon, and wrap 'em up like we did Beamish, and leave 'em up by the marsh to be found, and people will think the Ickabog got 'em. It's the Ickabog supposed to have a gun now, snapped Spittleworth, and 200 cloaks in which to wrap its victims. Well, if you're going to sneer at our plans, my lord, said Roach, why don't you come up with something clever yourself? But that was exactly what Spittleworth couldn't do. Cudgel his snaky brains, though he couldn't think of any way to frighten the cornucopians back into paying their taxes without complaint. What he needed was proof that the Ickabog really existed, but where was he to get it? Pacing alone in the front of his fire, after the others had gone back to bed, Spittleworth heard another tap on his bedroom door. What now? He snapped. Into the room slid the footman, Cankerby. What do you want? Out with it quickly. I'm busy, said Spittleworth. If it pleases your lordship, said Cankerby, I append to be passing your room earlier, and I couldn't help hearing about that there treasonous meeting in Barrowstown. What you, Lord Flapoon, and Major Roach was talking about. Oh, couldn't you help it? Said Spittleworth in a dangerous voice. I thought I should tell you, my lord. I've got evidence that there's a man within the city, that what thinks that same way of those traitors in Barrowstown, said Cankerby. He wants proof, just like them butchers do. Sounded like treason to me, It's treason, said Spittleworth. Who dares say such things in the very shadow of the palace? Which of the king's servants dares question the king's word? Well, as to that, said Cankerby, shuffling his feet, some would say that's valuable information. Some would. You tell me who it is, snarled Spittleworth, seizing the footman by the front of his jacket, and then I'll see whether you deserve payment. Their name. Give me their name. It's Dan Dovetail, said the footman. Dovetail. I know that name, said Spittleworth, realizing the footman who staggered sideways and fell into an end table. Wasn't there a seamstress? His wife, sir, she died, said Cankerby, straightening up. Yes, said Spittleworth slowly. He lives in that house by the graveyard, where they never fly a flag, and without a simple portrait of the king in the window. How do you know he's expressed these treasonous views? I appeared to overhear Mrs. Beamish telling the scullery maid what he had said Cankerby. You happen to hear a lot of things, don't you, Cankerby? Commented Spittleworth, feeling in his waistcoat for some gold. Very well. Here are 10 ducats for you. Thank you very much, my lord, said the footman, bowing low. Wait, said Spittleworth, as Cankerby turned to go. What does he do? Said Dovetail. This Dovetail. What Spittleworth really wanted to know was whether the king would miss Mr. Dovetail if he disappeared. Dovetail, my lord, he's a carpenter, said Cankerby, and he bowed himself out of the room. A carpenter, repeated Spittleworth aloud. A carpenter. And as the door closed in Cankerby, another of Spittleworth's lightning strike ideas hit him, and so amazed he was at his own brilliance, he had to clutch the back of the sofa because he felt he might tumble over. Well, that's that. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe. Give me a thumbs up, comment, share. Follow me on Instagram